Marcus Devereaux, a self-made billionaire, feared respected a man who turned nothing into an empire worth more than most countries. But behind the suits and the silence, Marcus carried something money could not fix. A broken trust so deep it had turned him cold. So one Saturday morning he walked into a crowded street, dropped his wallet in front of 3 strangers and watched. 2 of them kept walking. One took the cash. But the third, a single mother with holes in her shoes, what she did with that wallet brought a billionaire to his knees on a public sidewalk and changed both their lives in a way neither of them saw coming. Hello friends, welcome to today's story. Before we go any further, please like this video and subscribe to our channel so you never miss a story. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Are you in Atlanta, Chicago, London, Texas, New York? We love hearing from you. Now, sit back, get comfortable, and let's get into this story, because this one is going to stay with you long after it's over. The morning light came through the windows of Marcus Devereaux's estate, the way morning light does in places where everything is polished and perfect and painfully quiet. It moved across marble floors, across crystal vases filled with flowers that a housekeeper replaced every 3 days across a hallway so long that your voice would echo if you spoke loud enough. But nobody ever spoke loud enough in that house, because there was nobody there to speak to. The estate sat on 6 acres just north of Buckhead behind a set of iron gates so tall they blocked the house from the road entirely. You had to be invited in. Most people never were. Past the gates, a driveway curved through rows of magnolia trees, their white blossoms hanging heavy in the Georgia heat. At the end of the driveway, the house rose up like something out of a magazine, and it had been in magazines. Twice. 4 floors. 9 bedrooms, 7 bathrooms, a garage that held 6 cars, though Marcus only ever drove 2 of them, a kitchen with a marble island the size of a small boat, a swimming pool out back heated year-round that no one had swum in for over a year, and a dining room with a table built for 10 people where every single morning one man sat at the far end eating alone. Everything about the place said one thing: this man has won. And Marcus Devereaux had won. That was the truth. But the truth is a tricky thing because it can be real and incomplete at the same time. Marcus was 56 years old. He had grown up on the south side of Atlanta, in a public housing complex where the hallways smelled like pine sol and cooking grease, and the elevator broke so often that people stopped reporting it. His mother, Dolores, worked 2 jobs. Mornings at a hotel downtown, folding sheets and scrubbing bathtubs. Evenings at a laundromat 3 blocks from their apartment, sorting other people's clothes until her fingers cracked. His father left when Marcus was 7. No fight, no warning. Just a Tuesday morning when the other side of the bed was empty and stayed empty. His mother never spoke about it. She just worked harder. And Marcus watched her, and something settled inside him even at that age. A quiet, burning thing. Not anger exactly. Determination. The kind that does not shout. The kind that just refuses to stop. He started small. A folding table on the sidewalk outside their building selling lemonade in paper cups for 50 cents. He was 9. By 12, he was mowing lawns in neighborhoods 3 bus rides away. By 17, he was fixing up rooms in abandoned houses with tools he borrowed from a neighbor who worked construction. He learned plumbing from YouTube before YouTube was something people took seriously. He learned drywall from a man at the hardware store who let him watch and ask questions as long as he did not get in the way. At 24, he bought his first property. A falling-apart duplex on a street most people avoided. He fixed it with his own hands. Every wall, every pipe, every cracked window. He sold it for $60,000 more than he paid. Then he bought another one, and another. And again, and again, and again. 20 years later, Marcus Devereaux owned apartment buildings, commercial plazas, and mixed-use developments across Atlanta, Charlotte, and Memphis. His name was on buildings. His signature was on contracts worth more than some people would earn in 10 lifetimes. When Marcus walked into a room, people adjusted. They stood taller. They spoke more carefully. They wanted something from him, and he could always tell what it was before they opened their mouths. To the world, Marcus Devereaux was the definition of a man who made it. But the world only saw what Marcus allowed it to see. Inside that grand house, behind those iron gates, Marcus ate breakfast alone every morning, not because he wanted to, not because his schedule demanded it, but because there was simply no one there. He sat at the far end of that long dining table with a plate of eggs and toast prepared by his cook, a quiet woman named Mrs. Tillman, and he ate in silence. The kind of silence that is not peaceful. The kind that sits on your shoulders and presses down. The kind that makes the sound of a fork against a plate feel louder than it should. Mrs. Tillman would bring his coffee at exactly 6:45 and say, "Good morning, Mr. Devereaux," and he would nod. And that was usually the most human contact he had before noon, sometimes the whole day. This was Marcus Devereaux's real life. And the reason for it had a shape. Two shapes, actually. Two betrayals that had built the wall he now lived behind. The first was a man named Curtis. They had grown up together in that same housing complex, same hallway, same broken elevator. Curtis was the closest thing Marcus had to a brother. They had shared meals, shared secrets, shared the kind of bond that only forms when two people survive the same hard thing together. When Marcus's business started doing well, Curtis came to him with a plan. A restaurant. His dream. He needed $200,000 to get it started. Marcus did not hesitate. He wrote the check the same afternoon. He did not ask for paperwork. He did not ask for a contract. Curtis was family. That was enough. 3 months later, Curtis was gone. The restaurant never opened. The money never came back. No phone call, no letter, no explanation. Just silence. The kind of silence that answers every question you are afraid to ask. Marcus sat in his car in a parking garage that evening for 2 hours. He did not drive. He did not call anyone. He just sat there with the engine off and the windows up, staring at the concrete wall in front of him, trying to understand how a person you loved could take from you so completely and disappear so easily. He never found the answer. The second was his wife. Her name was Nadine. They were married for 8 years, and for most of those years Marcus believed, truly believed, that she was the one person who loved him for who he was and not for what he had built. She was warm. She was present. She laughed in a way that made him feel like maybe the world was not as cold as he had decided it was. He had opened up to her in ways he had never opened up to anyone. He told her about his father leaving. About the lemonade stand. About the nights when his mother came home so tired she fell asleep sitting up at the kitchen table with her shoes still on. He gave Nadine everything. Not just money. Time. Honesty. The soft, unprotected parts of himself that he had kept locked away for years. And she had taken them. All of them. When the divorce papers arrived, Marcus's lawyer found something. A shell company registered under a relative's name that Nadine had been funneling money into for the last 3 years of their marriage. Small transfers at first, then larger ones. By the time it was over, she had moved close to $2 million out of their shared accounts and into a place Marcus was never supposed to find. He did not fight it publicly. He did not scream or threaten or make a scene. He signed the papers. He let her go. And that night, standing in the kitchen of his empty house, he felt something close inside him, not break, close. Like a door being shut very quietly by someone who has decided they will never open it again. After that, Marcus Devereaux stopped trusting people. Not dramatically, not loudly, quietly. The way dangerous things happen. He smiled at events. He shook hands at galas. He sat through dinners and laughed at the right moments and said the right things. But if you looked closely, if you really looked, something in his eyes was missing. Not a wall you could see. But you could feel it. If you got too close, something would shift. His voice would go even. His face would go still. He would nod politely and step back. Not with his feet, with everything. He had learned to be in a room without really being in it. To sit across from someone and seem present while inside he was somewhere far away behind a door that no one had the key to. His housekeeper, Mrs. Tillman, was the only person who saw it clearly, because she was the only one who was there every day. She saw the untouched plates. She saw the way he stood by the window in the evenings, looking out at the garden with the expression of a man who had misplaced something important and could not remember where he left it. She never said anything. It was not her place. And Marcus never asked her to. Trust is a currency, and Marcus Devereaux had been bankrupt in it for a very long time. It was on a Friday evening that the idea first took shape. Marcus had just left a charity gala downtown. One of those events where wealthy people gather in expensive clothes and write checks and feel good about themselves for a few hours. He had written his check. He had shaken the hands. He had smiled for the photographs. And now he was done. He sat in the back of his car while his driver pulled out of the hotel parking structure, and he watched the city move past the window. Atlanta at night. Headlights and streetlights and the glow of restaurant signs. People walking. People talking. People living their ordinary, unhurried lives. The car stopped at a red light near a busy intersection. And that was when Marcus saw it. A man in a gray jacket was walking quickly down the sidewalk. As he walked, something slipped from his back pocket. A wallet. It hit the pavement and skidded slightly to the left. The man kept walking. He did not notice. 3 people passed the wallet. The first, a woman in heels, glanced down and kept moving. The second, a young man with headphones, stepped right over it. The third, an older man with a briefcase, looked at it, looked around, and walked on. Then a boy appeared. He could not have been more than 11 or 12. He was carrying a box of candy bars, the kind kids sell outside grocery stores. He saw the wallet on the ground. He picked it up. He looked inside it. Then he closed it and ran. Not away. After the man. The boy caught up to him half a block later, tugged on his sleeve, and held the wallet out. The man in the gray jacket took it. He did not say thank you. He did not look the boy in the eye. He just snatched the wallet, checked the contents, and walked away. Did not even break stride. The boy stood there for a moment. Then he turned around, walked back to his corner, set down his box of candy bars, and kept selling. Marcus watched the whole thing through the car window. The light turned green. The car moved forward. But Marcus did not move. Not inside. Something had landed in him, heavy and sharp and clear. That boy had nothing. He knew there would be no reward. He knew nobody was watching. And he gave it back anyway. Not because it made sense, because it was right. Marcus leaned back against the leather seat and stared at the ceiling of the car. A thought was forming. Not a business thought, not a strategy. Something else. He wanted to know if that boy was an exception, or if there were others like him. People who would do the right thing when there was no reason to, when the money was real and the temptation was heavy and nobody would ever know. He thought about it the entire drive home. He thought about it while he sat in his study with a glass of water he did not drink. He thought about it at 3 in the morning when he was still awake, staring at the ceiling in his bedroom with the lights off. By morning, Marcus had a plan. He would build a test. A simple one. A wallet. His wallet. An expensive leather bifold, the kind that felt heavy in your hand. Inside, he would place $2,000 in cash, 2 credit cards, and one more thing. A photograph. It was small, no bigger than a playing card, and the edges had yellowed with age. It showed a boy, maybe 10 years old, standing beside a woman in front of a brick building with a metal railing and a cracked front step. The boy was smiling. The woman was not. She was too tired to smile. But her hand was on the boy's shoulder, steady and firm, the way a person holds something they are determined not to let go of. That boy was Marcus. That woman was his mother. And that photograph was the only thing in the wallet that money could not replace. Marcus chose a Saturday morning, a busy stretch of sidewalk near a shopping district on the west side of the city, the kind of street where all kinds of people crossed paths. He dressed simply. No suit, no watch, no cufflinks. A plain button-down shirt, dark jeans, clean sneakers. He looked like anyone, that was the point. His assistant, a sharp young man named Devin, stood 50 meters away with a phone in his hand, recording everything without drawing attention. Marcus walked slowly along the sidewalk with the wallet in his hand, held loosely at his side, and when the moment was right, he let it fall. The first woman was Monique. She was about 35, dressed in a fitted blazer and pressed slacks, walking fast, phone pressed against her ear. She was mid-conversation, her voice clipped and professional. The wallet hit the pavement less than 2 feet from her path. She glanced down. Her eyes registered it. Then they moved forward again, and so did her feet. She stepped past it without breaking stride, as if it were a crack in the sidewalk, something beneath her attention. Marcus picked up the wallet. He walked another block. He dropped it again. The second woman was Keisha. She was about 40, standing at a coffee cart on the curb, counting coins in her palm to pay for a small cup. The wallet landed near her left shoe. She looked down. She bent and picked it up. She opened it. Her fingers moved past the credit cards and found the cash. 20 hundreds. She looked up. She looked left. She looked right. One long, careful look in each direction. Then she folded the wallet closed, slid it into her handbag, adjusted the strap on her shoulder and walked away. She did not look back. Marcus watched from across the street. His face showed nothing. He turned to Devon. Devon looked at him and waited for instruction. Marcus said nothing. He picked up a new wallet identical to the first, with the same amount of cash, the same cards, and the same photograph tucked into the inside pocket. He walked 3 more blocks to a quieter stretch of sidewalk near a dollar store with a hand-painted sale sign in the window. He dropped the wallet one final time. And then there was the third woman, Darlene Washington. She was walking slowly, not because she wanted to, because the little girl holding her right hand had short legs and a habit of stopping every few steps to point at things. A pigeon on a fence, a dog across the street, a dandelion growing through a crack in the concrete. Darlene was 31 years old. She carried a plastic bag in her left hand, the thin kind that stretches at the handles from the dollar store behind her. She wore a plain t-shirt, the kind that has been washed so many times the collar has gone soft and shapeless. Faded jeans, and shoes. The shoes. White sneakers that had once been white, now a tired yellow-gray. The left one had a small hole near the toe, a split in the fabric that she had tried to fix with glue, but the glue had peeled away and the hole had come back. She walked on the outside edge of that foot, a habit so practiced it had become invisible to her. A tiny adjustment, a small way of hiding something she could not afford to fix. The wallet landed on the sidewalk about 4 feet ahead of her. She almost stepped on it. "Mama, what's that?" The little girl Zuri was pointing at it with the absolute certainty of a child who has spotted something interesting. Darlene stopped. She looked down. She let go of Zuri's hand for a moment and bent to pick it up. It was heavier than she expected. Good leather. She opened it. The first thing she saw was the money. $200 bills fanned slightly crisp. $2,000. She stared at it. Her lips parted just slightly. $2,000 was more than she made in a month. $2,000 was rent and groceries and the electric bill that had a red notice on it sitting on her kitchen counter right now. She looked at the money. Then she looked at Zuri, who was crouching down to examine a beetle on the sidewalk. Then she looked at the money again. But then her fingers moved. Past the cash, past the credit cards, to a small pocket on the inside flap, the photograph. A boy and his mother, standing in front of a brick building with a metal railing. The boy smiling. The mother's hand on his shoulder. The image had yellowed at the edges the way photographs do when they have been carried for a very long time, handled often, looked at again and again. This was not a photograph that had been forgotten in a wallet. This was a photograph that lived there. Darlene looked at it for a long time. She did not think about what she could buy with $2,000. She thought about who had lost it. She thought about the boy in the photograph, and the woman beside him who looked tired in the way that only certain kinds of mothers look tired. The kind who work too much and sleep too little and never once complain about it because complaining takes energy they do not have. She thought about how the building behind them looked a lot like the one she had grown up in. Darlene closed the wallet. She took Zuri's hand, and she began to walk. Not away, forward, looking, searching. She did not know that the man who had dropped it was standing 50 meters behind her, watching every step she took. She did not know that she was being tested. She did not know that her whole life was about to change because of what she did next. She only knew one thing. This wallet was not hers, and someone somewhere was missing it. Darlene Washington had not always been this tired. There was a time, a long time ago now, when she was just a girl with braids and scraped knees running through the hallways of a housing complex on the west side of Atlanta, and the world had felt big and possible and full of things she had not yet learned to be afraid of. She grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment on the 4th floor of a building where the stairwell smelled like bleach and cooking oil, and the elevator worked about half the time. Her mother Lorraine was a prep cook at a restaurant downtown. Not a fancy restaurant. The kind with laminated menus and a lunch rush that started at 11:30 and did not stop until 2. Lorraine left the apartment every morning at 5 and came home every evening around 7, and she almost always brought something with her. A styrofoam container. Sometimes rice and beans, sometimes chicken, sometimes just bread rolls and a cup of soup. Whatever the kitchen had not sold that day, whatever the manager said she could take. Darlene and her younger brother Jamal would sit at the small table in the kitchen and eat whatever was in that container, and Lorraine would sit across from them and watch them eat and not touch a thing herself until they were finished. She always said she had already eaten at work. Darlene believed her for years. She was 14 before she realized her mother had been lying. Lorraine had a saying. She said it the way some mothers say grace before a meal, quietly, firmly, like a rule that had been written into the foundation of the house itself. Baby, we don't take what isn't ours, not even when we're hungry. Especially when we're hungry. Darlene heard that sentence more times than she could count. When she found a $5 bill on the floor of the laundromat and wanted to keep it, when Jamal came home with a toy that a kid at school had given him, and Lorraine made him take it back, when the landlord overcharged them by $40 one month, and Lorraine paid it anyway because she was not sure it was a mistake and did not want to accuse someone of something she could not prove. That was Lorraine. A woman who carried honesty the way other people carried wallets. Close. Always. Even when it cost her. Darlene was 19 when she lost her. It happened on a Tuesday. Lorraine was at the restaurant finishing the dinner shift. She was washing dishes in the back kitchen when she collapsed. A stroke, fast and sudden and final in the way that the worst things always are. By the time the ambulance arrived, Lorraine was unconscious. By the time Darlene got to the hospital running from the supermarket where she worked, the night shift, still wearing her name tag and her apron because she had not thought to take them off, it was over. She remembered the hallway. She would always remember the hallway. The fluorescent light buzzed the way fluorescent lights always do in places where bad news lives. A low, steady hum that gets inside your head and stays there. A nurse met her at the door of the room and said something gentle that Darlene did not fully hear because her ears had stopped working properly the moment she saw her mother's face through the glass. Lorraine looked peaceful. That was the thing people said afterward, and it was true, and Darlene hated it. Peaceful was for people who had chosen to rest. Her mother had not chosen anything. She had been taken in the middle of doing someone else's dishes, in a kitchen that was not hers, in a building she did not own, for a wage that was never enough. Darlene sat beside the bed and held her mother's hand. It was still warm. She did not cry. Not then. She sat there until the warmth faded, and then she sat there a little longer, because leaving meant it was real, and she was not ready for it to be real yet. After that, everything changed the way everything changes when the person holding everything together is suddenly gone. Darlene dropped out of community college. She took over the lease. She raised Jamal through his last 2 years of high school, working double shifts, signing permission slips, sitting in the parking lot of his school on report card days, because she had promised Lorraine she would. Jamal enlisted in the Army the month after he graduated. He was stationed overseas now. He sent money when he could. It was never much, but Darlene never complained about it because that was not who she was. At 26, she met a man named Terrence. He was kind and funny, and he looked at her the way nobody had looked at her in a long time, like she was someone worth staying for. He said he would stay. He said it with his whole chest, and for a little while she believed him. Zuri was born 7 months after Terrence left. He did not leave a note. He did not leave an explanation. He just stopped coming home one day, and the number he had given her stopped working, and Darlene was alone again. But this time she was not just alone. She was alone with a baby, a rent payment, and a grief that had grown a new layer on top of the old one, the way paint covers a crack in a wall, but the crack is still there underneath. Now Darlene was 31. She worked 2 jobs. Mornings at a hotel downtown, making beds and scrubbing bathrooms and folding towels so tight they looked like they had never been touched. Nights at a grocery store on the east side, scanning items and bagging produce and saying, "Have a good evening" to people who never looked her in the eye. Zuri went to a free daycare program run by a church 3 blocks from their apartment. Darlene dropped her off at 6:45 every morning and picked her up at 6:15 every evening, and in between she moved through her days the way a person moves through water. Slowly, heavily, with effort that nobody sees. The rent was a month behind. The electric bill had a red notice on it, the kind printed on paper that feels different from regular mail. Heavier somehow, like the paper itself knows it is carrying a threat. The refrigerator held half a gallon of milk, a pack of sliced cheese, some leftover rice, and a jar of peanut butter that Zuri ate with a spoon because Darlene had forgotten to buy bread and did not want to say that out loud. And then there were the shoes. The white sneakers with the hole near the left toe. Darlene had bought them 2 years ago at a discount store for $19. They had been fine then. Clean, sturdy, the kind of shoes that did not pretend to be anything other than what they were. But 2 years of walking to bus stops and standing on hotel room floors and pacing grocery store aisles had done what 2 years always does to cheap shoes. They wore down. They split. The left toe opened up like a small mouth, and Darlene glued it shut, and it opened again, and she glued it again, and eventually the glue stopped holding. She walked on the outside of that foot now, a tiny shift in her step. An adjustment so small that no one would notice unless they were looking very carefully. Every time she thought about buying new shoes, the math started in her head. $19 was 3 gallons of milk. Was 2 packs of diapers she no longer needed, but Zuri's pull-ups cost almost the same. Was half the electricity bill. Was the difference between late and on time for the rent. So, the shoes stayed. And Darlene kept walking on the outside of her left foot. And she did not complain about it. Not because she was brave, although she was, but because complaining took energy, and energy was something she could not afford to waste. Those shoes told a story that Darlene never told anyone. They were the ledger of every sacrifice she had made in silence. Every dollar she had chosen to spend on Zuri instead of herself. Every morning she had looked in the mirror and decided that her needs could wait one more day. And somewhere beneath all of it, underneath the exhaustion and the math and the quiet, relentless effort of holding a life together with almost nothing, Lorraine's voice still lived, steady as a heartbeat. Baby, we don't take what isn't ours. Not even when we're hungry. Especially when we're hungry. Darlene walked up the block with the wallet in one hand and Zuri's fingers in the other. She stopped the first person she saw, a man in a baseball cap carrying a bag of groceries. "Excuse me, did you drop a wallet? Brown leather about this size." The man shook his head and kept walking. She tried a woman at the crosswalk. Same question, same answer. She tried a teenager leaning against a lamppost, scrolling through his phone. He looked at her like she had asked him something in a language he did not speak, shrugged and went back to his screen. Zuri tugged on her hand. "Mama, can we go home? I'm tired. Just a little more, baby. Someone is missing this." She walked another block. The afternoon sun was heavy and low, the kind of late-day heat that presses down on a city like a warm hand. Cars moved slowly through the intersection ahead. A woman was selling bottled water from a cooler on the corner. Somewhere behind them, music was playing from a parked car, something slow and muffled through closed windows. Darlene stopped at a coffee shop near the end of the block, a small place with a chalkboard menu and 2 metal tables outside on the sidewalk. She went in and spoke to the young woman behind the counter. "Did anyone come in asking about a lost wallet? Brown leather had some cash in it." The young woman shook her head. "No, ma'am, nobody." Darlene thanked her and walked back outside. Zuri had already climbed onto one of the metal chairs and was resting her head on the table, her small legs swinging below the seat. Darlene sat down beside her and lifted Zuri onto her lap. She held the wallet in both hands and opened it again. Past the cash, past the cards, to the photograph. She looked at it more carefully this time. The boy in the picture was maybe 10 years old. He wore a white t-shirt. His smile was wide and easy, the kind of smile that belongs to children who do not yet know what is coming. The woman beside him had her hand on his shoulder. She was not smiling. She was too tired to smile. But her hand was firm and steady, the way a person holds something they refuse to let go of. The building behind them was brick, metal railing, cracked front step. Darlene knew that kind of building. She had grown up in one just like it. She had climbed stairs just like those. She had stood on steps just like that one, waiting for her mother to come home from work. Who is this boy? Does he know that someone kept this photograph all this time? Does he know what it means to carry a picture like this in a wallet you touch every single day? She did not know that the boy in the photograph was standing 30 meters away from her at that very moment. She did not know that he had been watching her for 20 minutes, that he had seen her pick up the wallet, that he had seen her close it without taking anything, that he had watched her walk up the block asking strangers if they had lost something. That he had seen her sit down on that metal chair with her daughter in her lap and look at his mother's face with an expression he had not seen on anyone's face in a very long time. Gentleness. Not pity. Not curiosity. Gentleness. The kind that comes from recognition, from knowing. And he had seen the shoes. Marcus Devereaux stepped away from the storefront where he had been standing and walked toward her. His steps were measured. His face was still. But something behind his ribs had shifted a weight he had been carrying for so long that he had forgotten it was there, and now it was moving just slightly like a stone, finding a new position after years of pressing down in the same spot. Darlene saw him approaching. She stood up, lifting Zuri onto her hip with one arm and holding the wallet out with the other. "Excuse me, sir. Is this yours?" Marcus looked at the wallet. Then he looked at her. Then, without meaning to, he looked at her shoes. The white sneakers, the hole near the left toe, the glue that had given up. Then he looked back at her eyes. They were steady, large and dark and completely steady. The eyes of a person who is not performing honesty, who is simply honest. A few seconds passed. The traffic moved behind them. A car horn sounded somewhere far away. Zuri shifted on Darlene's hip and buried her face in her mother's shoulder. "Yes," Marcus said. "It is." Darlene handed it to him. She smiled. Not a big smile, a small one, tired at the edges, the kind that costs nothing to give but means everything to receive. "I'm glad I found you," she said. The photo inside. It looked important. Then she adjusted Zuri on her hip, turned and began to walk away. Marcus stood on the sidewalk and watched her go. He did not call after her. Not yet. He opened the wallet. The cash was there. All of it. 200 still fanned the same way. The credit cards untouched. And the photograph. His mother, his 10-year-old self, still in the inside pocket, still exactly where he had placed it. She had nothing. And she took nothing. And that was the moment Marcus Devereaux felt something he had not felt in years. He did not have a word for it yet, but it had roots. Marcus drove home that evening in silence. He did not turn on the radio. He did not make a phone call. He sat behind the wheel and let the city pass by the windows, lights and storefronts, and people moving through their evenings, and he thought about a woman with a hole in her shoe who had held $2,000 in her hands and given it back. He pulled through the iron gates parked in the garage and went directly to his study. He did not eat dinner. Mrs. Tillman had left a plate for him in the kitchen, covered in foil the way she always did. He walked past it. He sat at his desk and took the wallet out of his pocket and set it in front of him. He opened it to the photograph. He had looked at this picture thousands of times. It had lived in his wallet for over 20 years. But tonight, he looked at it differently. Tonight he looked at his mother, Dolores Devereaux. 5'3", hands that were always chapped, shoes that were always worn. A woman who had cleaned other people's rooms and folded other people's sheets and never once taken so much as a bar of soap from a hotel bathroom, even when they had none at home. Even when it would have been so easy, even when nobody would have known. He looked at the woman in the photograph, and he saw another woman. Younger. Different face. Same eyes. Same shoes. The same shoes. Marcus set the photograph down and leaned back in his chair. The house was quiet around him. The kind of quiet that is not peaceful. The kind that presses in. He picked up his phone and called Devon. "The woman from today," Marcus said. "The third one. I need you to find out who she is." Devon did not ask why. He had worked for Marcus long enough to know when a question was not welcome. "I'll start with the footage from today and check the coffee shop. I'll have something by morning." By 9 o'clock the next morning, a file was on Marcus's desk. Darlene Washington, age 31, single mother, one daughter, age 5, 2 jobs, one at a hotel, one at a grocery store. Current address, a 4th floor walk-up in a building on the west side. Rent status 1 month behind, no savings, no family in the city except the daughter. Marcus read the file slowly. He read it the way he read contracts, carefully, missing nothing. But this was not a contract. This was a life. A whole life reduced to a few lines on a page, and every line said the same thing. She has almost nothing. He set the file down on his desk. He placed his hands flat on the surface and sat very still. A thought arrived. Not loud, not dramatic, quiet the way the most important thoughts always are. I have spent 30 years building a fortune, and the most valuable thing I own is a photograph that a woman with holes in her shoes could have sold but chose to return. He sat with that thought for a long time. Outside the window, the morning light moved across the garden slowly. The fountain ran the way it always did, steady and constant and indifferent. He thought about Monique. She had seen the wallet and walked past it. He did not blame her for that. Some people are simply not paying attention. That is not a crime. It is just a kind of sleep. He thought about Keisha. She had picked it up, seen the money, and taken it. He did not blame her either. Not really. He understood the math of desperation. He understood what $2,000 looks like when your bank account is empty. He was not angry at her. He was not angry at either of them. He was tired. Tired of being right about people. Tired of the story he had told himself for so long that it had become the only story he knew. The story that said people will always take. That is what people do. And if you are foolish enough to trust them, you deserve what you get. But Darlene had not taken. Darlene, who needed the money more than either of the other two, who had a daughter to feed and a rent payment she could not make, and shoes that were falling apart on her feet. Darlene had held that wallet with both hands and walked up a city block in the afternoon heat, asking strangers if they had lost something. She had proved him wrong. And being wrong had never felt so much like relief. Something shifted in his chest that night. Not a big movement, not a collapse, just a small adjustment, the way a stone shifts in the ground after years of rain. Almost nothing. Almost everything. He did not sleep. He lay in his bed in that enormous house and stared at the ceiling and thought about a boy who sold candy on a street corner, about a mother who brought home restaurant leftovers, about a wallet on a sidewalk and a woman who gave it back, about shoes with holes in them and what those holes really meant. By the time the sun came up, Marcus had made a decision. 3 days later, Marcus Devereaux pulled out of his garage, but not in the Bentley, not in the Range Rover, not in any of the 4 other vehicles that sat polished and waiting in their numbered spaces. He drove the Honda Accord, a 2003 model silver, with a scratch on the rear bumper and a small dent in the passenger door that he had never bothered to fix. It was the first car he had ever owned. He had bought it the year his business started making real money, and he had kept it in the garage ever since. Not because it was valuable, because it was true. He drove across the city, past the office towers downtown, past the shopping districts, past the neighborhoods where the houses got bigger and the lawns got wider, and then past the point where everything reversed, where the houses got smaller, where the lawns disappeared, where the buildings got older and the paint got thinner and the streets got busier with people who move the way people move when they are carrying something heavy. He parked on a street he had not visited in years but recognized immediately because it looked like the street where he had grown up. Same kind of buildings, same kind of storefronts, same feeling in the air, a mixture of food and exhaust and music from open windows and the low hum of a neighborhood that is always awake because rest is a luxury not everyone can afford. Darlene's building was on the corner. 4 stories. No elevator. The paint on the outside was peeling in patches like a wall that had started to undress itself and given up halfway through. The front door was propped open with a brick. Marcus walked in. The stairwell was narrow. The handrail was loose. On the 2nd floor, a television played behind a closed door, the sound muffled and tinny. On the 3rd floor, a child's bicycle leaned against the wall, one training wheel missing. The fluorescent light on the ceiling buzzed and flickered like it was trying to decide whether to stay on or give up entirely. He reached the 4th floor, apartment 4C. He stood in front of the door for a moment. He could hear movement inside, a child's voice, the sound of running water. He knocked 3 times. Slow. The door opened and Darlene stood in the doorway. She was wearing a hotel uniform, dark blue, with a name tag clipped to the pocket. Her hair was pulled back. Her face carried the particular kind of tiredness that does not come from one bad night, but from years of not enough sleep, stacked one on top of another. She looked at Marcus. She blinked once. Then recognition arrived. "You're the man with the wallet." "I am," Marcus said. "I'm sorry to come unannounced. I was wondering if I could talk to you for a moment." Darlene's eyes moved past him, briefly scanning the hallway the way a person does when a stranger appears at their door. Then she looked back at him. Then she glanced behind her into the apartment, and Marcus caught a glimpse of it. Small, clean, organized in that careful way that people organize things when space is limited and nothing can be wasted. A sofa with a faded cloth draped over it. A small table with 2 chairs. Children's drawings taped to the refrigerator with strips of masking tape. She stepped aside. "Come in." Marcus entered the apartment the way a tall man enters a small room, carefully pulling himself inward, making himself less. He was aware of every surface, every detail. The framed photograph of a woman on the bookshelf beside the television. The pair of small pink sneakers by the door. The stack of picture books on the floor beside the sofa. Zuri appeared from the hallway. She stopped when she saw Marcus and looked up at him with the enormous, undecided eyes of a child, determining whether a stranger was interesting or frightening. "Are you Mama's friend?" she asked. Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it. Darlene answered for him. "He's someone Mama helped the other day, baby. Go play in your room for a bit." Zuri considered this. Then she turned and walked back down the hall, looking over her shoulder once before disappearing through a doorway. Darlene gestured to the small kitchen table. Marcus sat down on a plastic chair that creaked under his weight. She moved to the counter and filled a kettle. She opened a cupboard and took down 2 cups. They did not match. One was white with a chipped rim. The other was green with a faded floral pattern. She dropped a tea bag into each. Marcus looked at those cups, and something hit him so suddenly that he had to grip the edge of the table. His mother had made tea in cups that did not match. Every single morning. In a kitchen that looked almost exactly like this one. A kettle on the stove. 2 cups from different sets that had been broken and scattered over the years until nothing went together anymore, but the tea still tasted the same. Darlene set a cup in front of him. She sat down across the table with her own. She did not ask him what he wanted. She simply waited. Marcus wrapped both hands around the cup. The warmth moved through his palms. He looked at Darlene. She looked back at him, patient, unhurried, not uncomfortable with silence the way most people are. "I need to tell you something," he said. His voice was steady, but something underneath it was not. "That wallet, I didn't lose it by accident." Darlene's cup stopped halfway to her mouth. She set it down slowly. She looked at him. She did not speak. The kitchen was quiet. The kettle on the stove ticked as it cooled. From somewhere in the building a door closed. From Zuri's room the faint sound of a little girl talking softly to herself. Darlene looked at Marcus across the small table in the small kitchen in the small apartment that held everything she had in the world. And she waited. Marcus told her everything. He spoke slowly, the way a man speaks when he knows the words coming out of his mouth might cost him something. He told her about the gala, about the boy with the candy bars, about the idea that had kept him awake at 3 a.m, about the wallet, the cash, the photograph, about Monique who walked past, about Keisha who took it, about standing 50 meters away and watching 3 strangers answer a question they did not know they were being asked. He told her all of it. And when he finished, the kitchen was very quiet. Darlene did not smile. She did not nod. She did not say thank you or how interesting or anything that a person might say to fill the silence with something comfortable. Her expression changed, not dramatically, but the warmth that had been there a moment ago, the openness, the willingness to sit across from a stranger and offer him tea in a cup with a chipped rim, something in that shifted, cooled, like a window closing on a warm day. "So you tested people," she said. Her voice was level, careful, like an experiment. Marcus did not answer right away. He heard it. The edge. Not anger exactly. Something quieter than anger and sharper than disappointment. "I didn't return that wallet to pass a test," Darlene said. She looked at him directly. "I returned it because it wasn't mine." The sentence landed in the room like something heavy set down on a table. Simple. Final. Not defensive. Just true. Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at the cup of tea in his hands, and then at the woman sitting across from him, and for the first time in a very long time Marcus Devereaux did not have a strategy. He did not have a next move. He had walked into this apartment as a man who was used to controlling rooms, and now he was sitting in a plastic chair in a kitchen the size of his walk-in closet, being corrected by a woman who made less in a month than he spent on a single dinner. And she was right. "You're right," he said, "and I'm sorry." Darlene studied him. Not his clothes, not his posture, his eyes. She looked at him the way she had looked at the photograph in the wallet, carefully, like someone searching for the person behind the surface. And she found him, the way certain people can. Not because they are trying to impress or manipulate or position themselves, but because they have been hurt enough to recognize hurt in others. Because pain teaches you to see pain if you let it. "You didn't come here to thank me," she said quietly. "You came here because you needed someone to be real with you." Marcus was still. The kind of still that is not composed. The kind that happens when someone has said the thing you have been avoiding saying to yourself. "I haven't had that in a long time," he said. The kitchen was silent for a moment. The refrigerator hummed. From down the hall, Zuri's small footsteps padded across the floor, and then she appeared in the doorway, rubbing one eye with her fist. "Mama, are we eating dinner?" Darlene looked at her daughter. "In a little bit, baby. Go play for a few more minutes." Zuri looked at Marcus, then at her mother. Then she turned and padded back down the hallway, her small feet making almost no sound at all. Darlene looked back at Marcus. The coolness in her expression had not disappeared, but it had shifted. There was something else there now. Not trust, not yet. But the beginning of a decision, a door not open but no longer locked. "I can't be bought," she said. "But I can listen." And then Darlene told him about Lorraine. She did not tell him because he asked. He had not asked. She told him because she could see that he needed to hear something real, and the realest thing she had was her mother. She told him about a woman who woke up at 4:30 every morning and put on the same pair of worn-down shoes and walked to a bus stop in the dark because the restaurant did not pay enough for a car and the bus came at 5:15. And if she missed it, she would be late. And if she was late, she would lose the shift. And if she lost the shift, there would be no dinner that night. She told him about the styrofoam containers, about the rice and beans, about the bread rolls and the cups of soup, and the way Lorraine would set the food on the table and sit across from her children and say she had already eaten when she had not, when she was hungry, when she had been hungry all day. She told him about the saying, the one Lorraine repeated like a prayer. "Baby, we don't take what isn't ours, not even when we're hungry, especially when we're hungry." She told him how she used to think it was just something mothers said, like, "Be good," or "Say please." But as she got older, she understood it was more than that. It was a code, a way of moving through a world that did not make it easy to be honest. A decision Lorraine made every single day, over and over, when nobody was watching, and nobody would have blamed her if she had decided differently. She told him about the night her mother died. She spoke slowly. Her voice did not shake, but it had a weight to it, the kind of weight that comes from carrying something for so long that the carrying itself has become part of you. She told him about the phone call, about the supermarket, about running 6 blocks in her work apron because she did not have a car and could not afford a cab, and the bus would take too long, about the hospital hallway and the fluorescent light that buzzed the way fluorescent lights always do in places where the worst kind of news is waiting. She told him about arriving too late, about sitting beside her mother's bed and holding her hand, about the hand being warm, about staying until it was not. "I sat there until her hand went cold," Darlene said, "because leaving meant it was over. And I was not ready for it to be over." Marcus did not move. After the funeral, Darlene said, "I went through her things. Her closet. It was small. Everything in it was old. She never bought herself anything new. She wore the same 3 outfits to work for years. And at the bottom of the closet, underneath a folded blanket, there was an envelope." She paused, looked at the table. I opened it. There was money inside. Cash. I counted it. She swallowed. $340. She stopped again. The kitchen was completely still. $340. My mother's entire life savings, for shoes. Marcus's face did not change, but his eyes did. There was a note, Darlene said, in her handwriting. Just 3 words. For Darlene's shoes. She pressed her lips together. The weight in her chest, the one she had carried since the night. She ran 6 blocks to a hospital and arrived too late. It pressed against her ribs, the way it always did when she said her mother's name out loud. Not a sharp pain. Not the kind that makes you cry out. The kind that sits there. Heavy. Constant. The kind you learn to breathe around. "I didn't buy shoes," she said. "I paid the rent with it, and I kept wearing the old ones, and I will keep wearing them until they fall apart completely. because every time I look down at those shoes, I see her." Marcus looked down. Under the table, in the dim light of the small kitchen, Darlene's shoes were visible. The white sneakers, the hole near the left toe, the glue that had given up. He looked at them for a long time. Then he looked up. And his eyes were wet. He did not speak. There was nothing to say that would be worth more than the silence. So he let it stay. And Darlene let it stay. And for a few minutes, two people, who had come from the same kind of place, and ended up in very different ones, sat at a small table in a small kitchen and said nothing, and the nothing was more honest than any words either of them could have found. 1 week passed before Marcus made his next move, and when he made it carefully. He did not call Darlene to the estate. He did not send a car. He called her on the phone, the number he had gotten from Devon's file, and asked her simply and directly if she would be willing to come to his office the following Tuesday at 10 in the morning. She asked why. He said, "Because I would like to show you something, and I would like to do it properly." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'll be there." She arrived at 10:05, 5 minutes late because the bus had taken a detour, and Zuri had stopped twice on the walk from the bus stop to look at things. A fire hydrant, a dog behind a fence. Zuri noticed everything. That was Zuri. Darlene was wearing her best clothes, a blouse she had ironed that morning on the kitchen counter because she did not own an ironing board. Dark pants, clean, simple, and the shoes, the same shoes. The white sneakers with the hole near the left toe. She had not tried to hide them. She had not borrowed a different pair. She had come as she was. That was Darlene. The building was tall and glass, and everything about it said money in the quiet, tasteful way that real money speaks. Darlene walked through the lobby, carrying Zuri on her hip, and gave her name to the woman at the front desk, who made a phone call and then smiled and told her to go up to the 14th floor. The elevator was the quietest elevator Darlene had ever been in. Zuri pressed her face against the glass wall and watched the city get smaller below them and said, "Mama, we're flying." Almost baby. Marcus met them at the elevator door. He was wearing a suit, but he had taken the jacket off and rolled his sleeves. He looked different here than he had in her kitchen. Larger, more composed, more like the kind of man whose name was on the side of buildings. But when he looked at Zuri and said hello again, something in his face softened, and for a moment he looked exactly the way he had looked in her kitchen, like a man trying very hard to get something right. He led them down a hallway and into a conference room with a long table and windows that looked out over the city. Atlanta spread below them in the morning, light wide and bright and busy. Zuri pressed her hands against the window and stared. Marcus closed the door. On the conference table, 3 items were arranged in a row. Not centered, just placed there simply the way you might set things on a kitchen table. The first item was a shoebox. White. Simple. The kind you get at any regular shoe store. The second was an envelope. Small, plain, sealed. The third was a document, several pages held together with a clip. Marcus looked at Darlene. "Please, sit down." She sat. Zuri climbed onto the chair beside her and began drawing invisible shapes on the polished table with her finger. Marcus pushed the shoebox toward her first. "Open it." She lifted the lid. Inside was a pair of white sneakers. Not designer, not expensive. The same style as the ones on her feet. Simple, clean, new. She looked at them. Then she looked at Marcus. "They cost $65, he said. "They are not special. But they are from someone who understands what shoes mean to you." Darlene touched the laces. She did not take them out of the box. She just touched them lightly, the way a person touches something that is more than what it appears to be. Marcus pushed the envelope toward her next. "Open it." She picked it up. It was light. She tore the seal and looked inside. Cash. She pulled it out and counted it, and her hands slowed and then stopped. $340. She looked at Marcus. Her lips parted. No sound came out. "This is your mother's money," Marcus said. His voice was very quiet. "I am not giving you this. I am returning it. She saved it for your shoes. I just made sure it got to the right place." Darlene's hands trembled. She set the money down on the table very carefully, the way you set down something fragile. She pressed both hands flat on the surface and took a breath that came in uneven, the kind of breath that is trying very hard to be steady and not quite managing. Marcus pushed the document toward her last. He waited until she looked at it. Then he spoke. "This is a job offer. A position called Community Liaison at a foundation I am building. The foundation supports single mothers in underserved neighborhoods, housing assistance, childcare access, job training, emergency support." He paused. "The position comes with a salary, health insurance for you and Zuri, and hours that work around a school schedule." Darlene picked up the document. She read the first page slowly, then the second. Her eyes moved across the words, and Marcus could see them filling slowly the way a glass fills when the water is poured carefully. "I don't want to give you things," Darlene, Marcus said. "I want to give you a chance to do what you already do. See people. Really see them. And get paid for it." She set the document down. She looked at the shoes, at the envelope, at the offer letter, at the city outside the window, at her daughter drawing shapes on the table. She was quiet for a long time. The room was quiet, the kind of quiet that holds its breath. "Why?" she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Marcus looked at her. "Because you held a wallet with $2,000 in it, and all you saw was a photograph of a boy and his mother, and that boy was me." He paused. "And that mother, she would have liked you." Something broke in Darlene then. Not loudly. Not the way things break in movies with a sound and a dramatic collapse. Quietly. The way real things break. Tears came down her face, slow and silent, while she sat perfectly straight in her chair with her hands on the table and her daughter beside her. She did not cover her face. She did not turn away. She let it come. Zuri looked up. She saw her mother's face, and her small expression changed to one of concern that was enormous and pure in the way only a 5-year-old's concern can be. "Mama, why are you crying?" Darlene reached out and put her hand on her daughter's head. She smoothed her hair once, twice, "Because someone remembered your grandma, baby." Zuri considered this with the seriousness of a child processing information that is bigger than she can fully hold. "Is that good crying? Or sad crying?" she asked. Darlene smiled through the tears. A real smile. The kind that costs everything and gives back more. "Both, baby. It's both." The weeks that followed were quiet ones. The kind of quiet that is not empty, but full. Full of beginnings and adjustments and the slow, careful process of a life rearranging itself into a new shape. Darlene started the job on a Monday. She arrived at the foundation office at 8:45, 15 minutes early, wearing the new white sneakers and a nervousness she did her best to hide. The office was small, 3 rooms above a pharmacy on the ground floor of a commercial building on the west side. 2 desks, a filing cabinet, a printer that jammed every third page, and a phone that rang more often than anyone expected. Her title was Community Liaison. Her job was simple in description and vast in practice. Go into the neighborhoods, find the mothers who needed help, listen to them, connect them to the resources the foundation could provide. Housing leads, childcare subsidies, emergency food assistance, job placement, the kind of help that exists in a city like Atlanta but hides behind phone numbers nobody answers and forms nobody has time to fill out. Darlene was good at it. Not because she had training, not because she had a degree in social work or a background in nonprofit management. She was good at it because she had been one of them. She knew what it felt like to sit at a kitchen table at midnight doing the math that never added up. She knew what it sounded like when a mother said, "We're fine," and meant we are drowning. She knew the difference between the kind of help that makes a person feel seen and the kind that makes a person feel small. She went door to door. She sat in kitchens that looked like hers had looked 6 weeks ago, small, clean, held together with effort and stubborn pride. She drank tea from cups that did not match and listened to women tell her things they had not told anyone, because telling someone requires trusting someone, and trust requires feeling like the person across from you understands. One afternoon she visited a young mother named Shayla, 23 years old, 2 children, a 1-bedroom apartment with clothes drying on a line strung across the kitchen. Shayla apologized 3 times before Darlene had even sat down. "I'm sorry about the mess. I didn't have time to clean. I'm sorry." Darlene set her bag on the floor and sat at the small table and said, "My apartment used to look Shayla stared at her for a moment. Then her face crumbled softly the way faces crumble when someone has said the exact thing a person needed to hear and did not know they needed to hear it until it arrived. She cried, not loudly, just the quiet, overwhelmed tears of a woman who had been holding everything together so tightly that the slightest loosening of the grip brought it all forward. Darlene did not rush her. She sat and waited and passed her a napkin from the holder on the table and let her take her time. Because she knew. She knew what it meant to be seen without being judged. She knew the weight of someone simply saying, I understand. Darlene wore the new sneakers to work every day. They were white and clean, and they fit well, and they did not have a hole near the left toe. She walked normally in them, both feet flat, no adjustment, no hiding. And every evening when she came home, she took them off and placed them by the front door and looked at the shelf beside the television where two things sat side by side, her mother's photograph and the old shoes. She had put the old shoes on the shelf beside her mother's photograph, not because they were worth keeping, but because they were worth remembering. Zuri was enrolled in a better preschool program now, one with a real playground and a teacher who knew every child's name and a reading corner with books that were not falling apart. Darlene had paid off the back rent. The electric bill was current. The refrigerator was full. Not overflowing, not stocked the way a wealthy person's refrigerator is stocked, but full in the way that matters. Milk, eggs, fruit, chicken for dinner, peanut butter, and bread. The kind of full that means tomorrow is taken care of. But the change that mattered most was not the things. It was smaller than that, harder to see. For the first time in years, Darlene went to sleep at night without the math running in her head, without the quiet, relentless calculation that had lived behind every thought for so long she had forgotten what thinking felt like without it. How much is rent? How much is electric? How many hours until the next paycheck? Can I make it? Can I make it? Can I make it? The math had stopped. And in its place, something else had arrived. Not happiness exactly. Darlene was too practical for a word that large. But something close. Something that felt like standing on solid ground after years of balancing on something that was always about to give way. The weight in her chest had not disappeared. It would never fully disappear. Lorraine would always be Lorraine, and missing her was simply part of who Darlene was now. But something had shifted. The stone had found a resting place. And for the first time in a long time, it did not press quite so hard. Marcus changed too. But his change was slower, harder, the way heavy things move. Not all at once, inch by inch, because the wall he had built was thicker than Darlene's, and it had been standing longer, and taking it down required something he had not practiced in decades, patience with himself. He stopped eating breakfast in the dining room. He moved to the small table in the kitchen, the one near the window where Mrs. Tillman kept a plant she watered every morning. The table seated too. He sat at it alone, but somehow the aloneness felt different there. Smaller. Less like a verdict, and more like a fact that might someday change. He started visiting the neighborhoods where the foundation worked. Not for meetings, not for photo opportunities. He just went. He drove the Honda Accord across the city on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, and parked on side streets, and walked into community centers and sat in plastic chairs and waiting rooms, and listened to the sounds of a world he had left behind 30 years ago, but never fully forgotten. He did not announce himself. He did not introduce himself as the man whose name was on the checks. He wore plain clothes, and sat quietly, and watched people move through their days with the particular energy of people who are managing more than anyone should have to manage alone. One Thursday at a community center on the west side, Marcus was sitting in the hallway outside a meeting room where a support group for single mothers was in session. Darlene was inside, facilitating. He could hear her voice through the door, steady and warm, asking questions, listening to answers. A boy sat down beside him. He was maybe 8 years old. He had a backpack on the floor between his feet, and a worksheet on his lap, and a pencil that he was holding, the way a person holds something they would rather throw across the room. Marcus looked at him. "What are you working on?" The boy did not look up. "Math. I hate it." Marcus almost smiled. Almost. Then, something in him shifted, and the almost became real. A smile. Small. Quiet. But real. The first real smile he had felt on his face in longer than he could remember. "Can I see?" Marcus asked. The boy shrugged and slid the worksheet over. Multiplication. 3 digits. The kind of problems that look impossible when you are 8 and sitting alone in a hallway while your mother is behind a closed door talking to strangers about things you are too young to understand. Marcus pulled his chair closer. Let me show you something. You see this number here? Break it into pieces. It's easier when it's small. They sat together for 20 minutes. Marcus walked him through each problem step by step, the way his own mother had once walked him through homework at a kitchen table in a building that looked a lot like this one. The boy's pencil moved faster. His shoulders dropped. By the last problem, he was almost smiling too. When Marcus stood up, the boy looked at him with the clear, unguarded eyes of a child who has not yet learned to be suspicious of kindness. "You're kinda good at this," the boy said. "You should be a teacher." Marcus walked out of the community center and stood on the sidewalk in the late afternoon light and pressed the back of his hand against his eyes. He stood there for a moment. Just a moment. Then he took a breath and walked to his car. That night he went into his study. He opened his wallet and took out the photograph. His mother, himself at 10 years old, the brick building, the cracked step. He had carried this picture in his wallet for over 20 years. Close but hidden. Always with him but never looked at. A keepsake that had become more like a habit than a memory. He set it on the corner of his desk, face up, visible, where he would see it every morning when he sat down and every evening when he stood up, where it could watch him and where he could be watched. He looked at his mother's face through the glass of the small frame he had bought that afternoon at a shop on the way home. He looked at the boy he had been. Before Curtis. Before Nadine. Before the wall. He was not a different man. He was just slowly becoming the man he had been before the walls went up. 6 months later, on a Saturday morning in October, the foundation opened a new community center on the west side of Atlanta. It was not a grand opening. There were no reporters, no ribbon-cutting ceremony with oversized scissors, just a building that had been repaired and repainted and filled with things that mattered. A tutoring room, a childcare space with soft mats and picture books, a kitchen where cooking classes would be held twice a week, a meeting room with chairs arranged in a circle for the support groups that Darlene had been running out of borrowed spaces for months. The block was alive that morning in the way only certain blocks in certain neighborhoods come alive, with music from a speaker someone had set up on the front steps, and children running between the legs of adults and women, standing in small groups talking with the comfortable ease of people who have known each other's struggles long enough to stop pretending they do not exist. A long table had been set up outside with food. Homemade food, macaroni and cheese in foil pans, collard greens, cornbread, a sheet cake with yellow frosting that 2 of the mothers from the program had baked together the night before. It was not catered. It was not elegant. It was real. Darlene stood near the entrance. She was wearing the white sneakers Marcus had given her and a simple dress she had bought with her own money from her own paycheck, and she stood with her hands at her sides looking at something on the wall just inside the door. A plaque. Small. Simple. Mounted at the height of a person's eye line, it read the Lorraine Washington Community Center. Darlene had not known. Marcus had not told her. She had learned the name of the center this morning when she arrived early to set up chairs and saw the plaque for the first time, and she had stood in front of it for a very long time without moving. She reached out now and touched the letters with her fingertips. The L. The W. She traced them slowly the way a person traces something they want to make sure is real. Zuri was beside her, holding her hand, looking up at the plaque, with the serious concentration of a child reading something important. "Mama, that's Grandma's name." Darlene knelt down so she was level with her daughter's eyes. She smoothed Zuri's hair. "Yes, baby, that's Grandma's name. Is Grandma here?" Darlene looked at the plaque, then at the building, then at the children running through the rooms inside, and the mothers standing in the doorway, and the table of food, and the speaker playing music on the steps. "Yeah, baby," she said softly. "I think she is." She stood up. And that was when she saw Marcus. He was standing a few feet away. Not in a suit. Dark trousers, a simple shirt, his hands in his pockets. He looked different from the man who had sat in her kitchen months ago. Not entirely different, but his eyes were different. There was something in them that had not been there before. Not happiness exactly. Something quieter than that. Something warmer. Like a room where someone has finally turned on the light. A little girl, maybe 6, ran past them and stopped and looked at Darlene with the enormous directness of a child who does not know how to be indirect. "Miss Darlene, is this place yours?" Darlene smiled. "It's not mine, sweetheart. It belongs to everyone." The girl considered this with great seriousness. Then she nodded once. "Well, it's the best place on this street." And then she was gone, running back through the door and into the building, her shoes slapping against the new floor. Marcus stepped forward and stood beside Darlene. Not in front, not behind, beside. They both looked at the plaque, at the name, at the light coming through the window, beside it falling warm and steady across the letters. From inside the building, the sound of children, laughter and small voices, and the clatter of chairs being moved by people who were making themselves at home in a place that had been built for them. "I think she would have liked this place," Marcus said quietly. Darlene looked at him. Her eyes were bright, not with tears, with something clearer than tears. The particular brightness of a person who has carried a heavy thing for a very long time and has finally found a place to set it down. "She would have liked you," Darlene said. Marcus was quiet for a moment. The afternoon light moved across the sidewalk between them. A breeze came through, warm and slow, carrying the smell of cornbread from the table outside. "Tell me about her," he said. Darlene smiled. It moved through her whole face the way light moves through water. Slow, warm, full. "She would have made you tea in a mismatched cup," she said, "and told you to sit down and stop looking so serious." Marcus laughed. Not a polished laugh. Not the careful, measured sound he had been making at galas and dinners for years. A real laugh. Short and surprised and honest, the kind that escapes before a person can catch it. And so she told him. And he listened. And for the first time in a very long time, neither of them was alone. I hope this story stayed with you the way it stayed with me. Like, share, subscribe, and tell me in the comments what would you have done with that wallet. Let me know where you are watching from. See you in the next one.